Hi there, this is Diane Hanks, one of 5 awesome optimists. I have a very exciting message to share with you today, and this is a little clue on what it is. It's about fairy tales. I came across a book that I had many years ago when I was in college, and one of my children's literature classes called, it's backwards, it's called The Uses of Enchantment, the Meaning and the Importance of Fairy Tales. I don't know why it shows up backwards like that. I don't know how to fix that either. But there was a special chapter in here called Fairy Tale versus Myth, Optimism versus Pessimism. And as I reflected, when I was a little girl, I loved fairy tales. I loved fairy tales. In fact, not just when I'm little, I love fairy tales today. And the whole success of Disney, the whole success of the movie Twilight, with all the magical elements and the good versus evil and all of those things, that should tell you how important fairy tales are to us in all kinds of solving different problems that we have, conscious and unconscious. He is very, very passionate in this book, The Uses of Enchantment. And as I was reflecting on some of my favorites, I just grabbed a few from my library. Puss in Boots. This was an actual collection of some right here. The Golden Book of Fairy Tales. There's Hansel and Gretel. And while I'm talking about Hansel and Gretel, it's kind of cool how he talks about how the worst fears of a child are imagined in a story like Hansel and Gretel, the fear of abandonment. And yet, with their cunning and their cleverness, they're able to not only survive, but they're able to defeat the Wicked Witch too. The weakest one, Gretel, is able to do that. And he talks about how they give those characters names so that they're very simple. Hansel could be anybody, Gretel could be anybody, but we get that it's a little girl and a little boy. But all the rest of the characters are just titles like the stepmother, the father, the woodsman, the witch. And I have another one, this is funny. Little Red Riding Hood, another example of not giving a certain name. And this one actually, turn it upside down and it tells the story through the wolf's eyes. It's hilarious. It's just so hilarious. And then I have this one, Fairy Tales. And this one is the meaty kind. It's the big, thick, no pictures really to speak of, just an occasional one. And then my favorite kind, which is the ones that have just delicious illustrations. And I think Rapunzel has always been one of my favorite. And as a child, it seems that there's always one story that you really, really identify with at certain times in your life. And he goes on to explain the meaning, the reason for that, and how important they are in the development of us having optimism to be able to overcome our own issues. Because surely if we're not being abandoned by our parents, we have other things, then we can handle it. And there's a whole chapter, I think I mentioned that before, Optimism versus Pessimism, and it's called Fairy Tale versus Myth. And the difference between myth, like Hercules, I guess, is the story always ends very tragically, where in a fairy tale, it always ends happily ever after. And so ordinary people like you, like me, get thrust into extraordinary circumstances and magic and enchantment. And they allow us to escape for a spell and sort of plot ourselves in that story. Lord of the Rings, all of the Disney movies. That, I mean, honestly, Disney has built an empire on our yearning for fairy tales. They're so important in society. What is your favorite fairy tale? What is it that about it that you loved? And can you see how it does give you hope? I mean, I remember at the end of one of the movies I saw years ago, what was it? Oh, what was it? It had Julia Roberts, and I saw it on TV. Oh, she says, yeah, I want the fairy tale. And we hold out because we think that that's possible to have that happily ever after. Not that it doesn't make us, real people, but it gives our lives a little sense of magic too. The one thing that I really, really wanted to share about fairy tales is how they actually almost save us, because we can identify with certain one. In fact, during the last few years, with all the trauma that was going on in my life, I identified so strongly with the tale of Alice in Wonderland. And so much so that I thought that it could be a very healing story for everybody, because everybody could identify as Alice. On my MakeoverSessions site, one of the first videos I ever posted was a story called An Awakening for Alice, because most of us have heard the story about Alice in Wonderland, and we've gone through different phases of what she went through, the healing, having something traumatic happen, and falling down that long rabbit's hole and hitting the bottom. And whatever it is, whatever it is for you, for me, there's something that brings us to surrender. And it's a very powerful thing to be able to watch someone like Alice, who is seemingly unprepared for life, wend her way and has a little help and guidance along the way from the Cheshire Cat, from Tweedledee, from Tweedledum. And each one of these people actually sort of let her realize that she has the strength that she needs within. The Wizard of Oz story, she had what she needed all the time. And so that's the power of us, of having and enjoying fairy tales. So that's my message about how to be more optimistic, is include more fairy tales in your life and really identify which are the ones that you have loved as a kid, and why is it, do you suppose, that you love them? And I'm going to include a link to one of my favorite Sesame Street spoofs about Rapunzel. It's so hilarious. It's so hilarious. I don't want to wreck it for you, but you have to watch it. Be sure to check the link. It is, it's the story of Rapunzel, and Prairie Dawn is Rapunzel, and Kermit the Frog is reporting on the thing, and you got to see what happened with the prince and with Rapunzel and her hair. And it's a standing joke in my family now, where he says, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, and she goes, what? I can't hear you. Anyway, you got to watch the rest of it. It's hilarious. Let me know what's your favorite fairy tale, and may you live happily ever after.